Okay. This week I want to I want to answer a question that actually I get asked quite often. Maybe two questions that I get asked quite often. The first question is this: Shane, how long is your hair? That's a question I get asked a lot. So I'm gonna go ahead and just answer this visually, I guess. That way we can just get this out of the way. It's this long right now. It's this long. The second question that's usually asked around this is, Shane, why do you have long hair? Let me just say right now, I'm not a hippie. I wasn't brought up by hippies. I wasn't, I don't have anything against them necessarily, per se. I mean, everybody needs Jesus, but no, it's not that. Actually, the very last time I had short hair was in 2009. And 2009 is a significant year for me and my family because that's the year that we moved over to Scotland so that I could begin my PhD. And I was engaging in something with the PhD that I knew the Lord had called me to, but I didn't actually know why I was even doing it. It was just an act of faith. I knew it was something I could do. I knew it was something the Lord had opened doors for me to do, but I didn't know exactly why I was getting a doctorate. But I knew that my family and I were sacrificing a lot to do it. So as a family of 5 at the time, we have a 6th one now. I mean, there's 6 of us now. But as a family of 5, we moved everything. We sold our home. We put everything in the basement that we could fit of my parents' house, and we moved to Scotland for 6 months. And it was such a significant engagement, knowing that the next 4 years, 5 years, I was going to be focusing on something that was brutal, to be honest. I knew it was something that could only be accomplished if the Lord's hand didn't just lead us to it, but if it stayed with us in it. And I came across this passage in Acts chapter 18, verse 18. This is Paul. It says, Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sisters and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Now check this out. It says, before he sailed, he had his hair cut off at Cenchrea because of a vow he had taken. Now I find that interesting. Because I sat there and I thought, well, what is Paul, what is he taking a vow for? Like, what vow is he taking and why? And there's a lot of theories on it. Is it a Nazirite vow or a modified Nazirite vow? And I think it's something in those lines. But now the question is okay, but what was it connected to? Like, if you take a Nazirite vow, you're committing to things like not cutting your hair. You're committing to things like not touching anything that's dead or not drinking any wine. You're abstaining from multiple things in order to create a space, a constant reminder that you are either asking of the Lord for something that you are desperate for, or you are engaged in a work that only the Lord can cause to come to fruition. I think that Paul's was a little bit of both. Just 2 chapters earlier, so Acts chapter 16, Paul and Silas are going, and Timothy are going on the second missionary journey. There's the disagreement with Paul and Barnabas right here in 15. And then 16 begins and Paul sets off sail, and now his eyes are set on Asia Minor, because that is such a shrewd and key location in the empire. So his eyes are focused on getting there, but the Lord prevents it. The Lord does not allow Paul to go there. Instead, the Lord puts Paul in a position where he will make his way to Macedonia. He even tries to go to Bithynia in Acts chapter 16, verse 7, but the Spirit of Jesus, it says, would not allow them to go. So, verse 8, they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. Paul, in his blind faith, was moving forward with the Lord in a way in which he didn't understand and into a location he didn't even agree with. But what I find very fascinating is that in chapter 16, verse 8, it says, so they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. Now listen to verse 9. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia. Did you hear the switch? The switch in the pronouns. You see, Paul and Timothy and Silas, they're traveling and trying to do the Lord's bidding, but the Lord won't let them go where it is they desire to go. Instead, the Lord sends them to this small little town of Troas, and yet it is in this town of Troas that Paul meets, in a divine appointment that he didn't even know was coming, Paul meets Luke, the writer of the book of Luke and the writer of the book of Acts. And without this engagement, without this movement of Paul, without knowing why and where he is going, without this deep commitment, we wouldn't even know the travels of Acts that ends up producing the letters that we see of Paul throughout the rest of the New Testament. You see, in God's sovereignty, he was guiding Paul. Paul didn't need to know where he was going or why he was going there. He just needed to go. And once he hits Cenchrea in chapter 18, he cuts his hair, and the reason why is because in 18 verse 19 it says this: "Then they arrived at Ephesus, which is in Asia." I read these verses and I sat there and I thought, we're selling everything and going over to Edinburgh to engage in something that frankly I don't even understand. I don't know why I'm doing it, and I'm not even sure how the Lord will use it. But I know that if the Lord doesn't see this through, it won't happen. It's not something that by my effort I could do. And so when we left, when we stepped foot on the boat, I made a vow not to cut my hair until it was done. Now, I finished my degree in 2014, and there was this powerful moment where my wife and I and my kids are standing they're standing in the living room, and I'm sitting there as we had a lady come to cut my hair. And at that moment, she cut off 14 inches. 14 inches. And it was a culminating moment where we were able to say, the Lord has been faithful to us, and we will continue to be faithful to the Lord. Now, some of you are going, no, wait a minute. It's not 2014, Shane, and your hair is still quite long. So what's the issue? Well, the issue was after I fulfilled the vow to complete something that with the Lord's help must have the Lord's hand to complete. Then I asked the question, what is my wife like? And what does my daughter want? You see, at times, my daughter will spend the evening just playing with my hair, and that's just a way we connect, that I cherish, that I value. And my wife likes it when my hair is long. Now here's the other reason. I learned, after cutting off 14 inches, that if I just grew out my hair, I could give it to different organizations that actually make wigs out of people's hairs for children that lose their hair during cancer. And I thought this: what does it mean to use everything that I have for the Lord and to advance His kingdom? What does it mean to take care of the least of these? Sure, it means give money. Sure, it means preach. But sometimes it can mean something as simple as growing out your hair, cutting it off, and giving it to them. And for those reasons, my hair is long. But here's the bigger reason I want to challenge you with today. If theology doesn't impact everything you do, everything you wear, everywhere you go, then what's theology really worth? But when we allow it to seep into everything that we are, it not only becomes a part of us, but we, by God's grace, become a part of it. Love you guys. See you next week.